As you may know, it is the end of the year. Actually, by the time I post this, it might be the beginning of a new year. I don't know yet. But either way, I am here today to do my top reads of 2014. These are not necessarily books that were published in 2014. I do not read a ton of new releases, so that would be nearly impossible. But these are the books that I read in 2014 and enjoyed the most. They are in no particular order. I'm not even sure how many of them there are. I am not prepared for this. But I'm going to tell you about them anyway. So, here we go. In 2014, I read the entire Mad Adam trilogy by Margaret Atwood. That is Oryx and Crake, The Year of the Flood, and Mad Adam, which was published in 2014, actually. These are the first books I've read by Atwood other than The Handmaid's Tale, and I absolutely, absolutely loved this trilogy. It is a post-epidemic society type dystopian deal. Not usually my thing. Not usually my thing at all. But it is amazing. In the first book, Oryx and Crake, I'm obviously not going to talk too much about the other two books, is narrated by a character called Snowman, who is alive after this giant plague hits the U.S., wipes out most of the world population. And living near these genetically engineered human-like creatures. You learn how he came to be there, why he is still alive when so many other people have died, what these genetically engineered beings are doing, how they came into life. And it's told through a series of flashbacks where he describes what life was like before most of life was wiped out, and it was basically a society based heavily on genetic engineering. It hit me so hard because it's not so far from the society we live in today. Margaret Atwood has an incredible imagination, but she also draws so much on what's going on in the world today. She's, if you follow her on Twitter or anything, you know she's very involved with environmental issues and things of that nature. So it was amazing. I loved it. The second book, you should know if you want to read this trilogy, takes place during the same time as the first book, but is told from different points of view. And then the third book wraps everything up very nicely. Definitely a page turner. I flew through all three of these books. I cannot wait to read more of Margaret Atwood, and I highly recommend this trilogy. I'll go ahead and talk about my other favorite series this year. I don't read a ton of series, so it's kind of weird that I have two series on this list. But that is the Fairyland series by Catherine and Valente. This is the third book. I actually do not have the first two with me right now. The first one is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. The second book is The Girl Who Fell Beneath Fairyland and Led the Revels There. And this is the third book, which is The Girl Who Soared Over Fairyland and Cut the Moon in Two. I believe that this is going to be a 7-book series, if I'm not mistaken. But these are all the books that have been published to date. This series, I'm sure you've heard it talked about. It's absolutely amazing. It is middle grades, young adult-ish, which again, usually not my thing. But Valente is an incredible storyteller. The world of Fairyland is absolutely amazing. It starts as most fantasy-type novels geared to this age range start. Young girl is at her home and is whisked away to this magical land. And then in every subsequent book, she returns to the land. She doesn't stay there the whole time. It's really, really, it's adorable. The writing's excellent. It's everything that I loved about every book I read in my childhood, like wrapped up into one amazing series, and I cannot wait to see where it goes. I will say that the first two books were a lot stronger than the third book, so that worries me a little bit, but I very much enjoyed reading this year, and I highly anticipate the release of the next book. The next one I have is a reread for me, but it will always live on my favorites list. It is one of my favorite books of all time. This is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I love this book. I hate all of the characters in this book. I love to hate them. It's such a heartbreaking story in a way. I'm not going to talk that much about it. If you haven't read this yet, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Get on it. And love this. The next book I have was a complete surprise for me. This is The History of Love by Nicole Krauss. Nicole Krauss was, at one time, I don't think she is anymore, married to Jonathan Safran Foer. Fun fact. This is a pretty recent novel. It was published in 2005. It is a series of narratives by different characters, all of whom are looking for something. They're looking for love, they're looking for themselves, and in the end of the book, the narratives come together in such a beautiful way. This book, I literally cried. I don't cry easily when I read books, so you know if I'm crying, it's a damn good book. I cried, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was a really beautiful little novel, and I highly recommend this as well. Next, I have another book, actually, that was published this year, and this is The Enchanted by Renee Denfeld. I'm sure you've heard of this one as well if you've been watching BookTube. It is told from the perspective of an inmate awaiting execution on death row. It is so wonderfully written. It's absolutely beautiful. Look, see? It's so beautifully written. I'm absolutely amazed by this book. Especially, I believe it's Renee Denfeld's debut novel. Really beautifully written. I will say, if you are easily upset by scenes of physical, sexual, graphic violence, any of that, do not read this book, because there are some scenes that you have to walk away from. But it's wonderful, and I loved it so much. Next, I have a book that I recently reviewed. This is Dear Life by Alice Munro. This is the only collection of short stories on my list this year. I did a full review on this. I'm not going to talk about it that much more. Alice Munro is a freaking genius. I do not know how I've gone this long without reading any of her stories. And again, I'm going to say this for all of them. If you haven't read any Alice Munro, please pick this up, because she is truly a master of short stories. If you are not big into short stories and want to be, this is also a good place to start. Starting with one of the masters isn't going to hurt you. So, there's that. Next, I have a book that you may be surprised to learn I just read this year. And that is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I had never read this. I believe I was assigned it in school. I didn't do a lot of my assigned reading in school. I was not very good at school. So, that's a lie. I was very good at bullshitting my way through school. But I didn't do a lot of my assigned reading, which is really weird. I didn't know I was going to study English until, like, my second year of college. So, there you have it. You know this book. You've probably read this book. This was so much more than I ever thought it would be. I understand why people rave about it. I understand how important it is now, and I am hoping to read this as soon as next year. And I have one more book, and that is Fall on Your Knees by Anne-Marie MacDonald. I had no idea what this book was about when I picked it up. It was on my to-read shelf on Goodreads, and I literally one day used like a randomizer to pick a book for me, and this came up. It was fate, I tell you, it was fate. This is set on an island off of Nova Scotia. It is a family saga. It follows 3 generations, I believe, maybe 4. I read it quite a while ago, so plot points are slipping me. But it's basically the story of this family and their 4 daughters, and the struggles that they all encounter, and the poverty they encounter, and how each of the 4 girls has such different personalities and works through their hardships differently. Again, with this one, there are some graphic sexual violence scenes, and if that is something that you do not like to read, I would not read this. Otherwise, I say definitely give this a go. I know, it was Oprah's book club. I want a different edition. I don't like these. Why can't it just be a sticker? Why can't I take it off? Again, this is Fall on Your Knees by Anne-Marie MacDonald. So those are my top reads of 2014. I feel like that whole filming was kind of disjointed, but I didn't want to talk about them too much because we'd be here all freaking day. All I can say is that I highly, highly recommend these books to almost anybody, unless I said otherwise, and you should read them all. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought of them. Let me know what your favorite books of 2014 were. I'd love to hear about it. And I will be back soon with my least favorite books of the year. See y'all soon. Bye.